I think when we look back at our track record and our most successful companies, the one common thread is it was the right person. And I think as a VC, especially in a slower market or a down market, you can get very caught up in the minutia of like, is the market big enough? Is that the right go-to-market strategy? Is the product fully built? And like, at the end of the day, we're supposed to be optimists, and so you have to come at it with a lot of optimism.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Executive, where we interview some of the best founders, investors, and operators on their life lessons and advice on how to make it at the highest level and how to take their companies to the highest level. We've had some incredible people on in the past, between Kelly Hennig of Stoke Space, who are building reusable rockets and just raised $100 million Series B, to York Space's CAO, Monica Palco, who in a very short amount of time have built $1 billion satellite company that is competing with all the legacy firms in that space, to Joe Musselman, who now is a VC, but prior to that took a year off to do a listening tour to just go meet really smart people and figure out what he wanted to do next. So we're going to do that and more in this coming year. We're going to go really deep into certain topics that we think people are experts in. Topics, that will include how to build a board, how to leverage your investors, how to raise capital, how to scale operations, to managing your time and having the best output possible in a week, in a year. What are the strategies behind that? We're going to interview some really incredible experts, and I'm excited about today because we are starting out with a bang with, I think, is one of the best, if not the best, venture firms, one of the best venture firms in New York, in Lerer Hippeau. And I think I can back it up with some of just the companies that they've invested in. I'll name a few: Cotopaxi, Glacier, Casper, Allbirds, Mirror, you name it. They are investing in things that are all around us today. And we're going to talk about a few companies as well today that are a little bit outside of that in the drone space or satellite. And so on deck, we've got Andrea Hippeau, who is a partner at Lerer Hippeau in New York. Andrea, so good to have you on, and thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Andrew, really excited to talk about a lot of operational things for VCs and advice for founders as well. But let's start with a little bit about your background. You started at Thomson Reuters, maybe a less traditional path. Walk us through how you got into venture, maybe starting from the back when you graduated school.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm really dating myself here, but like you said, I worked at Thomson Reuters in an entry level sales job right out of college. Really, my only requirement at that point was that someone gave me a job, and they did. I was, I thought I knew what I wanted to do, but in reality, I was, just needed that first kind of step. And so it was a very, very corporate job. I wore a pantsuit to work every day. I walked trading floors. It was during the financial crisis, so I was trying to sell a tier 2 product to Bloomberg, and honestly, sometimes uncovering that they didn't even know they were spending money with Thomson Reuters and ended up canceling. A lot of cold calling, but honestly, I think that kind of initial like sales skills were extremely important. I actually think that sales is like one of the most important skill sets you can have, and especially if you want to be a founder or an investor, it comes into play in both realms. And I also really loved the people that I worked with, which I also think make or break a job in a lot of ways, but knew it probably was not where I wanted to stay forever. So started thinking about next steps and going to business school, and kind of during the torturous process of taking the GMAT and getting my ducks in a row, got the opportunity to go over to Advanced Publications, which is probably lesser known. What's probably better known is they are the owner of Condé Nast. So It's a privately held company. One family, the Newhouse family, owns Condé Nast, which is Vogue and kind of all those really iconic brands, as well as a lot of other traditional media assets. So they had regional newspapers, a cable MSO, a lot of things that most people don't actually know about. And at the time, obviously they knew that there was kind of a digital transformation happening in media and beyond, and they wanted more exposure to that in their portfolio. So they had started a $400 million fund. The idea is it would be for M&A as well as VC investments, and kind of like different strategic relationships. So I was the second hire. There was an SVP and me. So I was doing everything from making coffee to writing investment memos for looking for new companies. And that was really like my first taste of kind of the tech founder startup world. And I was just completely in love. First of all, you didn't have to wear a pantsuit, which was a huge plus.
Huge plus.
But yeah, huge pluses. But most importantly, these were people that were really passionate about what they were doing. And I had never seen that kind of divide like that. I guess it's not a divide, the lack of divide between work and life, because I came from a job where you clocked in and you clocked out, and when you clocked out you were done. So really passionate people that were really had big ambitions to change the world. And so when I did eventually go to business school, kind of knew I wanted to stay in the startup ecosystem in some capacity. And so during business school I worked at a company it was called BarkBox at the time. Now it's called Bark and Co. And I think I was like, very, very early there as an MBA intern, and ended up staying on my whole second year as a GM for a new business line that they were trying to start. But saw that company go from, like 10 people in a one room office in Chinatown to, 70 plus people had raised their Series A, going onto their Series B. And it was just really exciting. I'm also a big animal lover, so it worked well with kind of what I loved. And when I graduated from business school, was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And at Lerer Hippeau, they had just raised their fourth fund. We're now investing out of our eighth fund. And they were able to hire and bring someone on. Candidly, my dad is a GP here, so I got my foot in the door that way.
Did you cold
But
call him, or how did that work out?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I actually didn't think I would stay here for as long as I have or intend to stay. I really loved being on the startup side. I knew I probably, wasn't going to be a founder myself, but loved being part of that kind of very, very early stage culture. But that was a decade ago, so I don't really think that's happening at this point. But I get to do like kind of all the best parts of being an operator, which is like working with founders and, kind of applying, different things I've learned along my career and from working with different companies. And so I get to kind of live and breathe it every day, just in a different way.
What was that conversation like with your dad? Was it, I want to come work at the firm and get some experience for a couple of years, or is he, coming to grab you and saying you got to work here for a couple of years? What was that like?
It was like, yeah, it was a very natural evolution. So my dad's been a bit of venture capitalist for as long as I can remember. And I was actually trained as a child when someone asked me, like, what does your dad do, to say venture capitalist? But I honestly had no idea what it actually meant. I think until I started doing the job. And it was much more, natural evolution. It was like, I had been at a portfolio company. I was kind of, ingrained in that sort of way. And yeah, it was like a come, we're hiring, you have the right profile. We think it's a great fit. There was no like, okay, now, it's your turn. You have to take over the like legacy. There was none of that. It was like, let's just do this and see how it goes. And that's kind of progressed since there. I started as associate, just like any other kind of post MBA. And then obviously I'm a partner now, but that's been over a 10-year span.
It's funny that you say that you were trained to say your dad is a venture capitalist. Where one of my friends, a very successful entrepreneur, his son was asked, "What does your dad do?" And he's like, "He takes phone calls. That's what he does." And obviously he's like, maybe I need to be, take a few less phone calls, but that's funny. That's what my kid thinks I do. That's it.
Yeah. Do right. I know. I have kids now, and I'm like, I can only imagine what they think I do.
I think the first thing my daughter did was grab something and put it to her ear. So it's trying to be better of a little separation.
Yeah, it's hard though, especially during the pandemic when we were all doing it from home.
Right. They saw it constantly. Or, now as, in a partner role that you're in now, what are you mostly focused on? Kind of define that role that you see it as?
Yeah. So the job is like probably 50-50. The percentage kind of skews one way or the other depending on the time. Sourcing new investments and making new investments, and then working with portfolio companies. I think probably as you evolve your career and venture, you probably start. It also depends where you are. If you go to like one of the later stage funds, you probably are only starting really with diligence work. But the way it works here at Lerer Hippeau is like, you kind of are focused more on sourcing higher quantity of companies, like as an analyst and associate, and then the role kind of evolves to be more portfolio support. But sourcing and doing investments, obviously, that's what we do. So that's a big part of the job, but also weighing that with portfolio support.
It churns more into portfolio support. Is that because you have just more experience in that and you can offer more, yeah, offer more value?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You have more experience, you've seen more reps. I mean, really, VC is like a rep game at the early stage. So I really think it takes at least a year, probably more like 2 years to hone your filter, which means like you have to drink from the fire hose at the beginning, and you need to meet with as many companies and as many founders as possible. And then over time, you learn like, okay, what makes an interesting company, what makes an interesting founder, and then obviously you also have to put that through the lens of the firm that you're at, because a great deal for Lerer Hippeau is not necessarily a great deal for another firm. That's really and at the same time also you're doing network building. So you need to build your own proprietary network where you're going to source deals from. So that I would say is like, I mean, it's something we're all always working on, but it really, when you start your career, that's where you're going to be spending most of your time, and that can take like probably 1 to 3 years to kind of fully form.
And you talked about you've built a filter. What is your filter? I don't know how much in depth you can go on it, but what's become kind of your matrix as you meet companies?
Yeah, so the job is both art and science, and I think the art piece at our stage, which is seed stage, pre-seed and seed, so that's very early stage companies, is more art. And what I mean by that is like at the end of the day, we're investing really in a person or a team of people, and I really know in the first, I'll say 2 minutes, but
Yeah,
probably more like 30
it's that
seconds to
quick.
be honest. I get like a gut sense on a person. I'm sure that exists across the board in different careers, but and then obviously you can be swayed one way or the other. Something can become more interesting as a meeting goes on, or something can become less interesting as a meeting goes on. But like that first reaction, gut feeling about someone, I think is like that's so important. And I think that's a lot where your filter honing comes in, and that's something that you can't like read in a textbook and learn about, or watch a bunch of YouTube videos and learn. Like that is like on the ground, boots on the ground, meeting people, talking to them, like really. And it's different for each person, right? Like what I value in a founder is going to be different than what one of my partners values in a founder. But I think there is like an overarching kind of like a drive and ambition you see in someone, qualities, the way they communicate, the experience they're bringing to the table, and that's where the filter really comes in. And then you get to like kind of the checklist of things. Okay, like is there proprietary technology? Is the TAM big enough? Or if they're starting with more of like a smaller TAM, is there expansion? What are the competitive sets? Are there a bunch of really well-funded competitors, or, bigger companies in the space? What's the revenue model going to be? So all that stuff comes, but I think the art piece of identifying the founder is the most important.
And so you have that 30-second gut, and that's probably because like you said, you've done so many reps that you kind of can tell with someone the way that they're talking to you, maybe how clear their vision is, how they're presenting, how good their sales skills are. Do they believe in the vision? What do you think are maybe the things that obviously it's a natural feeling, it's a gut feeling, but what do you think it is behind that's built into the gut, right? Of saying this is the right person.
For me, or like the traits that they have.
I think for you, well, for you of what the traits that they have, like what can you tell in that 30 seconds, even though it's a gut feeling?
Yeah. So I think it's how like comfortable someone is in their skin, and like and yeah, like you can get people who are like, you can tell that they're like, really well qualified in a lot of ways, but they don't come across with that like kind of commanding presence. And not that that person can't be successful. I'm sure there's lots of those types of people that are successful, but to start a company, you have to be like a little bit arrogant, a little bit crazy, like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, you're
also
looking for a
like,
little
but
crazy.
also grounded and down to earth. Like, like you need like this kind of perfect mix of all those different traits. And if you lean a little too heavy into any of those, it like puts the whole thing a little bit off kilter. And I think that sense of like, this is someone who like, knows what they're talking about, commands a room, but isn't over salesy or overconfident or comes across as arrogant. I think that's what you can kind of get in those first 30 seconds. And then you start to peel the onion and discover more about them. But you just kind of, it's like, that's why it's such a quick like discovery. It's almost like how someone sits in their chair, right? Like, are they like too upright? Are they slouched? Like, yeah, like that's why it's like a very quick read. It's not the only thing, but I would say like, at least for the investments that I've gone all the way through and we've invested in, like that initial gut has been there. And then sometimes the initial gut's there and then we pass for other reasons. But
You're looking for that crazy, well put together person.
yeah, but like it also comes in different formats. Like I'm thinking, well, we were just off before the show started talking about Urban Sky. Andrew, the CEO of Urban Sky, he's a business person. He's not a tech person, but he has that like really comfortable in his own skin, really knows what he's talking about, but really personable. Like you could just imagine him in a sales meeting, just like absolutely crushing it. And then another investment I did right before before Urban Sky is a company called Birdstop, and the founder there, it's a drone company, but the founder there is a data scientist out of Google, highly technical, and he's much more reserved and doesn't have that kind of boisterous, bubbly personality like Andrew. But he also, you can tell he knows what he's talking about. He's very comfortable. He commands a room, but like it's not the same energy. So it's not like a cookie
And that's okay.
cutter. It's not a cookie cutter like persona. It's like it can translate between different like personalities and types, technical, non-technical, like whatever it might be. Obviously, like, we're all snowflakes, so everyone's an individual. But that's why it's like an essence more than anything else. This is getting a little bit too like philosophical, but
No, it's true. And then, I guess the second part of that is, are you looking for them to be balanced by someone else on their team? That maybe it's not like that, right? Yeah. So if they're a little quieter, you're looking for the salesperson.
yes. Yeah, exactly. So in the Urban Sky example, Andrew, co-founder is Jared, who is like really highly
Yeah.
technical. I mean, you cannot find a person that knows more about stratospheric balloons than Jared. And so they are a great like yin and yang. Although Jared actually has a lot of those more personable traits too. Keith at Birdstop is actually a solo founder, and so, but he's at a different stage of his business. That was a pre-seed deal. So the idea there was like actually having more of a focus on the tech at that stage is more important because you're just kind of starting to experiment with the commercial side. I do think, and Keith knows this, so if he listens to this, I don't think he'll be offended that like eventually he does need to bring on that kind of counterpart. But
Yeah.
for the stage of the business, he has what is the harder thing to get, which is the like deeply technical like kind of skill set. And so we felt comfortable doing it without him having that person in place at that exact moment.
And the best probably have awareness that they need to bring that on at some point, even if it's not now. So you mentioned a few different companies, from drones to a satellite company. You've also invested in obviously Allbirds, a shoe company. Like you guys have done a pretty broad spectrum of investments. So the question that I have on that is, how do you become an expert in so many things, right? In order to be able to make that decision, that's not just purely off the founder.
Yeah. So we're not, I guess is the short answer. You can't be, right? You can't be an expert in all of these different things.
Yeah.
Generalist investors, like you're not going to be, you shouldn't pretend to be. That's not like the purpose of a generalist investor. That being said, are there some things that we know better than others? Yes, of course. So obviously, I mean, you mentioned Allbirds. We did a lot of kind of the early direct-to-consumer brand deals, and specifically Ben Lerer, who's a managing partner here, did a lot of those deals. Like Ben knows consumer like the back of his hand. And so like, if there is something consumer, we rely very heavily on him and his expertise. And then there's things like, I've done more like vertical marketplaces and vertical SaaS and highly regulated industries. I'm also known for like quote unquote weird ones, which I guess maybe Urban Sky and Bird
Anything that's weird that gets pushed to you. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my other partners is kind of a digital health expert. So there are like little like pockets of knowledge that within the team that we can rely on. But again, like we are here to back people, and so it almost doesn't matter what the company does, or not that we don't care. Of course we care, but when you find the right.
It's so early stage.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're looking for is like a founder, like the founder should be bringing a lot of that. Like, that's why we look for something called founder market fit. So we're looking for a founder that comes out of, either as a previous job or a personal experience that they had. It's like or the passion project, whatever it might be. But like the founder needs to bring that kind of domain expertise. But for us, like I said, like we are really good at picking people, and so like just by being good like people pickers, it's kind of like the rest sorts itself out, because startup companies have to pivot, both in big ways and in small. Like for example, probably one of the most successful companies in our portfolio, a company called Zipline, which is a fixed wing drone delivery company, which started with blood deliveries in Africa and now is coming to the US and doing and they're partnering with Walmart and doing like super like micro deliveries. And they've raised a lot of money. They're super, super successful. But when we invested, they were a company called Remotive, and they were making a robot for kids. And I'm sure maybe that company could have been successful, but I think Zipline is obviously going to be much more impactful and a much bigger business. But we're very, very lucky that founder was able to navigate that and pivot. So like, I think when we look back at our track record and our most successful companies, the one common thread is it was the right person. And I think as a VC, especially in a slower market or a down market, you can get very caught up in the minutia of like, is the market big enough? Is that the right go-to-market strategy? Is the product fully built? And like, at the end of the day, we're supposed to be optimists, and so you have to come at it with a lot of optimism. So that's what we're trying to do, and I think that's like the common thing between all those businesses. And then we also have a very vast network, both of our portfolio. So we rely a lot on our portfolio founders to help us diligence companies, but then also outside the portfolio. It's actually funny. I was looking at a company in like the motocross space for like enthusiasts of motocross. And I asked the team, I was like, I don't know, I need to talk to someone that really knows motocross. And I think 3 different people were like, oh, my
It's always the
cousin,
cousin.
is
Motocross.
a semi-pro like motocross person. And I was able to get all this feedback. So I think you'd be really surprised like how deep like just, the network of the team goes.
And it seems like maybe that's something that you've done really well is build your network. Is that one of the main sourcing strategies? Is it really just comes down to network and getting past deals on? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's 2 kind of buckets of network. There is like table stake network, which is like, just a network that everyone has to have. And that mainly is other investors, right? So we all know each other. Some of us are personal friends or friendly. We do business together, especially at the seed stage. You might have, 2 or 3 different funds in your round. So we can be really collaborative, which is something that I actually love about doing seed stage investing. So that's you have to just assume that if you're a VC, you have that network and you're growing that network all the time. And then there's proprietary networks, and those are networks that are proprietary to you as an individual investor, and those can come from people you went to school with. Maybe you rely on, especially as an early investor, and you're trying to like just figure out like, how do I start? Like, who do you hang out with? Where did you go to school? Like, how can you like kind of start like unraveling, pulling on the thread of people and who they could introduce you to, and so on and so forth. And then as you become a more established investor, it becomes very much so the founders that you've invested in. So like most of the best companies we see are actually our founders sending us their friends and people they know that are starting companies. Founders are fun.
Founders know founders, and that probably becomes a good tell for you who it's coming from. Yeah.
Absolutely, of course. If one of my best founders said, "I love this person, I think they're a killer," I'm going to take that like pretty seriously. And then you see people that come out of our later stage portfolio companies. So like that's starting to happen, especially as a lot of our portfolio starts to get more mature. Um, but yeah, this is a network game, and it's honestly something you can't like take your foot off the gas on, even as you become more senior. It becomes a little bit more passive because you kind of have your established network. But even for myself, like I'm making a goal this year to connect with a lot of new folks, especially during COVID when we were working from home. Like the Zoom networking just got really old really fast. But now that yeah, yeah. Now that we're really back in person, we can host people at our office. I'm trying to make sure I'm not just like resting on my laurels.
Yeah. What are you mentioned a few things that the founders maybe have done right. The ones that you in your firm has an incredible, pedigree of companies that have been successful. Zipline being one example, obviously Allbirds. It could go on and on. In addition to the intro, but are there one or two things that you look at from those founders that you said that's the common trait between those founders? They whatever that is. Like, what is there a common thing that you see in most of those that they did?
I think tenacity comes to mind. There's a lot of roadblocks, big and small, constant, I think, as a founder. So like you just have to like be able to run, willing and able to run through walls and not get exhausted. And it's an exhausting job and keep your eye on like the ultimate prize and stay motivated in that way. I think hiring is a huge one. I think, obviously, especially as a company scale, the founder can't do everything. So you need to surround yourself with the right people. I actually think kind of hiring more senior people for the stage of your company is a lot of something that a lot of our most successful founders have done. So kind of that forward thinking, like, hey, this person might have a little muscle for where we're at now, but in the next 6 to 12 months we're going to be there, and this person can start building their own team and the processes that we need to scale. So I think a founder's job post probably like series A, but maybe even before, or is two things: hiring and fundraising. Like hire the right people and don't run out of money would be like those are like the two things. And I do think that fundraising is an incredibly important skill for a founder to have. We have a lot of amazing founders over the years who just weren't great fundraisers, and maybe they had a great technology or a great company, but if you can't get that next round of funding, like that's going to kill your company. And it's a whole separate kind of skill set. Again, another kind of like an innate one, but one that also can be taught and learned. So being a good fundraiser, which I think kind of goes alongside with hiring, because there's a lot of similar kind of things you need to do there. And then I think financial fitness, which is not something honestly that we talked about that much um, in the earlier years. But I think, in this market downturn, and you got to see who was swimming without their swimsuit on, or whatever that saying is, when the water went out. You got to see who was swimming naked. Like, there, as a founder, your job is to completely understand your business like 360 degrees and all the levers you can pull, both like to turn on the gas and turn it off. And I think there are a lot of founders, and you can't really fault them. Like, most founders are not CFOs, or, like didn't come out of banking necessarily. And there tend to be more kind of creative types. But I think those are the founders that kind of found themselves in trouble this last cycle.
This last cycle, it's been interesting to see how some have responded to it. Obviously, there's been some that have made cuts, which were probably needed across the board, and then some that raised a little additional capital, even though there was a little more dilution, just in case this lasted longer. They had a lot of money in the bank, but they're like, I don't know how long this is going to last, so why not take on a little bit more dilution, and make sure I've got 6 more months of runway if this lasts 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. like I think you need to be very far-sighted as a founder, and the valuation question tends to be a nearsighted one. And I think at the end of the day, whether you own, 22% or 20% of your multi-billion dollar company, you're not going to look back. Yeah, you're going to be okay. You're not going to look back and be
It's
like,
going to be
dude, if I
okay.
had only raised my seed round at
Yeah.
a 15 and not a 10, like, I
The crazy ones may still be mad about that 2%, but yeah, they'll be fine.
yeah, yeah. But like at the end of the day, like you have to do what's right for the company for the long run and not for the short run. And I think that the best founders understand that.
And I'm sure during this period, you were advising a lot of startups on what they should be doing, probably a lot of hard conversations. I want to dive a little deeper into, the VC relationship with founders, how founders should leverage, their board the best, and really, you know, VCs obviously it's become maybe a little bit of a joke in the community of VCs add value, right? So, in talking about that, what are the ways that obviously your firm has a lot of experience? What are the ways that you try to add value to your portfolio companies once you've invested? What do you see your role as in helping them?
Yeah. So we are not here to run your company. That's for sure. You wouldn't want us to, nor do we want to. And again, going back to like, investing in the right people, like we trust that you are gonna, run the day to day correctly. Like that's a given. So I think there are some VCs that can get a little bit too kind of heavy handed with their companies. And I don't think that's the right approach. Nor is the like, hey, just call me if you need something approach either. So I think
They're purely capital. They make the investment. You never see them again. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of investors that sit in that bucket, and there's a place for them as well. I think we sit like pretty squarely in the middle where, we're talking to you on a regular basis. I mean, most of my founders I text with on a daily or weekly basis. That's the kind of relationship we have. It's not forced. It's not me saying to them, hey, give me the update on XYZ. It's just like a natural conversation that happens, them asking me things, me asking them things, me sending them things I saw in the news or the press, or a little insight that I learned from another portfolio company. And so that's like kind of just the natural kind of relationship you have, and you become friends. You become like actual real friends, and you care about each other and all of that. So the number one thing we ask for from our companies is open communication, and good communication. Doesn't mean you have to be pinging us every 2 seconds, but what happens with like good news travels fast and bad news travels not at all. So like if you haven't heard from a company in a while, it's very, very often bad news. And that's what we're trying to avoid, because problems can be solved if you catch them early and you address them early. It's when they snowball and, maybe a founder doesn't want to tell an investor some piece of bad news, which I totally understand. Like that's such a human response to want to like hide the lead on those sort of things. But like at this point, we've made the investment. Like we're on your cap table. We're on the same team. Like there's no point in, not divulging something to us because you think we might look badly on you. Like, what looks bad is if you just don't communicate and then we find out that there was this huge problem. And so it's really about communication. And so, at least a monthly kind of checkpoint, I would say. And then obviously as you become later stage and you raise more capital and you get kind of more of a formal board, then we like talk to you a little bit less. But as a generalist investor, I would say um, we've invested in over 500 companies over the last decade. So we've seen a lot of, different reps and different kind of issues that arise. And, that's what we can really help you with is like, what are the general company building things that you can either do right or wrong? And then we can get much more tactful too. Like we have a platform team that can help with very specific kind of needs. And then we can help with things like, helping you with your branding or with pricing or customer discovery, things like that. And then obviously, and let's say you're a healthcare company, we do have healthcare connections that we can help you with. But you probably have someone else in your cap table that can be even more impactful, kind of in those more like specific vertical things.
So interesting to me that going back to the communication piece, that's such a big sign. And unfortunately, it's a sign you only learn after you've made the investment. And I've talked to multiple VCs and they all say the same thing. And I've made a couple small investments, don't have near the reps that you do, but it has been to that point. The ones that I have heard from are still alive, that I heard from every month. And it would be the worst news. Like I laid off 90% of the team. here's how we're going to get through it. And this is awful. I'm going to help all those people get their, get jobs in other places. And the ones that you never hear from, I check in and I'm like, and they're like, it's not going well. It's crazy.
Yeah. 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 And I do think you can learn that about a person kind of in the process of making the investment, right? Like what are their follow-ups like? Are they sending you a note after with the follow-up materials you asked for? Or are you not hearing from them and having to follow up with them and say like, hey, you said you were gonna send me your financial model, like just checking in. Like I think when you get those kind of red flags, and this goes both ways, by the way, for founders when they're going through a process with VCs too. I think you need to vet the VC as much as the VC needs to vet you. But like anytime there's like a
Yeah,
communication
absolutely.
breakdown from either side during an investment process, it's probably not the right fit because like it's telling of how the relationship's going to be kind of on a forward basis. So but yeah, communication is key.
And, obviously you see some of that communication as you're making that investment. Once you're, whether you have a board seat or, for founders that have, obviously, as they're growing, they have boards, how should they use their board, right? Because it's an interesting relationship. It's a little bit of, support, but it's also a little bit of checks and balances. They invest a lot of money in this person and they want to make sure that they get a return on that. What's the healthy balance in that relationship?
Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about this because obviously there was a lot of kind of board breakdowns that you saw
From
both
OpenAI and
publicly and not publicly. Um, so I think our stance on this has changed actually a lot over the years. So when I first started at Lerer Hippeau like 9 years ago, we did not want early stage companies to have a board. The idea was like they're cumbersome, it's too much process, it's not appropriate for the stage of the company. You have to be much more nimble than that. Don't have a board. And then some companies started forming boards anyways because other investors were asking for it, but we wouldn't take board seats. We just said we have too many companies, we can't go to that many board meetings, whatever. We're not taking board seats. Then we started taking board observer seats, which is kind of our practice today. But I think with this last cycle, like I really have understood the importance of having a board even at the earliest stages when maybe you think like, oh, we're not ready for that, or it doesn't make sense. And it's less about like reporting to your board. It's much more about taking the time to put the materials together, to do a retrospective on what's happened in the last quarter or whatever the period of time that it has gone by. And then what's the strategy on a go forward basis, because otherwise you get bogged down in the day to day of being a founder and running your business. Like there's 1,000 million things to do at any given time that you never create that space for yourself and your team to really like do that like thoughtful process. And by the time you get to your board meeting, I mean, yeah, you're going to get some advice or pushback from people that maybe are going to help you or not, but that's not where the value lies. The value lies in yourself going through that and taking the time. um
So it's more about the discipline of what you're doing, the financial discipline, as well as that giving yourself the time to think about what is the strategy and are we hitting that strategy? Are we doing the things we said we're going to do?
Absolutely. Yeah. And having a plan. Again, these are early stage companies. No one is expecting you to hit your plan on the nose or hit the exact numbers. But like by having a plan and KPIs that you're tracking, then like, okay, did we do what we said we were going to do? Why not? What do we need to fix? Maybe the KPIs were wrong. What are the KPIs we should be tracking? Like, these aren't like sexy things to be thinking about, but they're important. And otherwise, I have seen companies like, a lot of companies in kind of the hype cycle raised without having to have any kind of investor governance because that's what you were able to do. And that, but I don't think that is actually good for companies. And if you pick the right investors and you have the right people around the table, it's not going to be cumbersome. Okay, yes, it's a pain to put together a presentation, like I get that, but it shouldn't be cumbersome. It should be a value add experience. And I think that companies try to put it off for too long. The second thing I'll say, because obviously with like OpenAI and all these really high profile things that you see, in reality, a board is very, very hard and very, very uncommon for a board to fire a founder. And I do get companies that are worried about that. Oh my God, well, if I form a board, then they'll be able to fire me. Like in reality, it's like legally in most cases impossible. OpenAI had
And they have controlling interests most of the time, the founder. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And OpenAI had a very, unique kind of structure that allowed that to happen. But and when you get to maybe much later stage companies, you're able to do that. But for a seed, Series A, Series B company, like you're not going to get fired by your board. So you shouldn't come into it with that kind of mindset of like, these people are out for my head. If anything, like why would a board want to fire you? Then they either have to run your business for you or replace you in some capacity. Like they want you to succeed. And then,
And you should be concerned if they're already worried about getting fired, probably.
yeah, but but you come from like, I'm thinking of one specific company came from like a very kind of traditional business background where like that, CEOs and got fired. Like that was just, they were very worried about that. But so I don't think that founders should be scared of their board, if anything, but you do have to manage it. And it's important to manage it, both your board and your investors, because if you don't manage your investors, you're going to be getting let's say you have 15 people on your cap table, you're going to be getting 15 different people reaching out to you every single month asking for an update or with some great idea for you or whatever it might be. So like, but you as a founder, like you need to put in boundaries and guardrails and be a clear communicator where you're not going to get all those one-offs that you have to then deal with on a daily basis.
I I would feel for the founders, and I think I would be like this. And I've talked to founders that have said the same thing, where I'd be nervous how many questions, because you want to leverage your board and your investors' experience, right? You're like, Andrea knows this really well. I want to ask her. But at a certain point, you're like, I think I'm asking her too much, to the point where she may think I don't know anything, right? And and I've had founders tell me, like, if their investors saw their search history, they probably would not have a job, right? And they're just figuring it out. So there's probably a healthy balance of, you want to make sure that that founder feels like they can go to you for anything, but it's probably difficult for them to go to you for too much, because you may start to lose confidence in them.
Yeah, yeah, like totally. But I don't think a founder should worry about that. Like,
Yeah. There's
that
bigger problems to worry about.
yeah, yeah. And your investor should be happy to help you.
Yeah.
They really should be. And again, at the same time, like, they're on your cap table, like the deal is done. So even if they lose confidence in you, they're like, what are they gonna do about it? Like, and
They're
you might as
stuck.
well leverage them to your best. Now, like, you shouldn't rely like I said in the beginning or a little while ago, like we're not there to run your company for you. So if you're asking someone like,
So when you make that investment, like as soon as it's done, is your first step just, hey, it's not here's what you should do, or whatever, it's how can I help? Like, where do you need help right away? Is that kind of your first step?
yeah, exactly. So we actually have like a formal onboarding process. This is also something that's somewhat new for us, where again, looking back at our portfolio over the years, like where do things go wrong when the expectations are not set from like the beginning, or where the groundwork isn't kind of put in. So, we used to kind of do an investment, and then you would just have like a call with the company and say, okay, like, congratulations, the deal closed. How can we help? Blah 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 blah. That's great to a certain degree, but what we do now is take companies through. It's a like a half day programming, and it's all about like, here are the expectations, here's like the foundation that you need to lay, both in terms of like the financial side of things, business milestones. There's a lot about kind of managing investors and board on there. Here's what we're expecting from you. Here's how you can leverage us. Here are the resources that are available to you. We spent a lot of time kind of going through kind of, where the company's at in initial strategy during that. But I think that really, like, this is probably a year that we've been doing this now. So it's probably 10 to 15 companies that have gone through this process. So I guess, a little more time will know, like, does it really make a difference? But I do think it sets you up for success with your investor. And as a founder, you don't have to wait for your investor to offer you something like that. Most investors don't, to be honest. Like, I think it's kind of not something that most firms do. So if you can, like, you could ask for something like that. You can request to sit down with them and do that sort of thing. And I think setting that from the very beginning is extremely important.
Let's we do probably 5 or so minutes left. I do want to talk to you about time management. I'm I'm really interested in time management because everyone has the same amount of hours in the day, right? But some people clearly use it so much better. And when you look at a year, 5 year, 10 year span, how are you managing so many things, between sourcing deals, helping companies, there's fires every single day. Have you found certain strategies that have really helped you manage your time or habits that you'd point to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I could be I could be better at it. Um, I I kind of like live and breathe in my inbox. So I don't have any like great, use this tool kind of hacks. Email is like it for me. Um, um, I do something at night that I learned from a doctor who specializes in sleep called like the power down hour. And so it's like the last hour before you go to bed. And you spend 20 minutes like doing anything that's going to stress you out, whether that's like your last few emails. Like for me with my kids, sometimes that's like, oh shoot, I didn't have time today to do that school form. Walking your dog, whatever it might be. So get it off your
Yeah.
plate, yeah, for 20 minutes. And 20 minutes you
Get it
spend
off your
on
plate.
hygiene. So whether you want to take a bath or spend more time on um, your face routine, whatever it is, 20 minutes of hygiene, and then 20 minutes of like reading a book or meditating or whatever it might be. And that has really helped me both with sleep, which was something I was struggling with given kind of like stress and all that. But it's a great way to kind of like put
Your mind's
a
just
put a
running.
period on the end
Yeah.
of the day. Like um you know
Yeah. And that was your struggle. It was more the end of the day than it was setting up the day.
Yeah, during the day, you're going a million miles per hour. My job is mostly meetings, so it's typically like back to back to back to back meetings, and then I just try to create space for myself when I can. With this at the end of the day, or whether it's reserving an hour in the morning for exercise or whatever it is. But I do think you have to be protective of your own time, and I think that's especially true, even more so true, 100 times more so true for founders because you're going to be getting pulled in 100 different directions. You have employees, you have investors, you have customers. Most importantly, you have customers. You have consumers who use your um, use your product. Um, so um, you just have to create that space for yourself in terms of like how to kind of more tactful tools and stuff. I think I'm just like everyone else who's just trying to get by. Yeah.
Just trying to figure it out. Well, as we start to wrap, what is the best advice that you've ever received?
It actually was from Kenny Lerer, who is one of the founding managing partners here. Um, this is way before I worked at Lerer Hippeau, actually, when I was getting the job at Thomson Reuters. I remember I was at J. Crew buying my new work wear. Which was, like we said at the very beginning, was pantsuits.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, where are you? What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm shopping for work clothes." And he said, "You should never get a job where you have to change your wardrobe." He's like, like you need to work somewhere where you can be like authentically yourself. Yeah.
I
So
love
so
that.
and I was like, "Oh,
That eliminates so many jobs. No, but I love that advice.
yeah, yeah." And it was like that really resonated for me, and I really saw it come to fruition when I went from the corporate job to the investing job, because all of a sudden I was like, "Oh wait." Like I did notice what people were wearing, and it was so different than what I was wearing. And more so than that, it was people who like, were very comfortable in their own skin and all that. Yeah.
It's about being yourself, a job where you can be yourself. What about a favorite book? Do you have a favorite book that you'd recommend?
Not really. I'm a fiction reader. I like to use it as escapism. And so I read mostly novels. I'm reading one now. It's called Covenant of Water, which is really good, but it is like 800 pages long. So I'm like in the last 20
It's
pages right
commitment.
now, and
Yeah.
it's taken me a while to get there, but it's a really beautiful book about like a generational family in India. So I would recommend that. But I don't have anything from a business perspective besides the kind of yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That, no, that's maybe even a better recommendation. Okay, final question. You're starting over. Today's your first day as a venture capitalist. What are you going to do? What's the number one thing you're going to do this year?
Oh, I'm I'm gonna network my butt off. I guess, especially if I was starting in VC today, that's what I would do. I would go and meet as many people as possible, build my network, and I think like this now is the time to do it in early stage investing.
Amazing. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to get in touch with you. Speaking of networking, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, I live in my email. So I'm Andrea at lererhippeau.com. And yeah, anyone can reach out to me and would love to hear from people.
Amazing. Andrea, thanks for spending the time and sharing all your insights. And excited to see and all the companies that you're invested in now. And maybe we'll talk in a few years and see how they're doing.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Yeah, thanks so much.